people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. Reigning IBF minimum weight champion Jocasta Valley posted this to her Instagram account. It reads, "Done deal. We signed to Golden Boy Promotions a multi-fight contract. Let's make it count starting this Saturday, 11th. My 5th world title defense. I know I have a great responsibility to all Latino women to let them know, keep working for their dreams because yes, you can."
You can see she's very happy about it.
Very happy to be picked up by a major promoter in the United States with a major platform deal. DAZN being that platform. As you can imagine, Jocasta Valley is elated to make her Golden Boy Promotions debut this weekend on the undercard of Munguia versus Kelly. And on the face of it, Golden Boy signing Jocasta Valley might seem like a step in the direction of a Senicia Estrada unification match because both Jocasta Valley and Senicia Estrada hold alphabet titles in the minimum weight division. On the face of it, that's how it looks.
We know there's an ongoing rift between Senicia Estrada and Golden Boy Promotions.
We talked about it here on the channel and how the word around the campfire seems to be that Senicia Estrada is set to return this summer with or without Golden Boy Promotions.
So did Golden Boy sign Jocasta Valley to compel Senicia to stay?
Because they will have at least one of the other champions in the minimum weight division under contract, thus making the fight between them should be easier now that it's an in-house fight and they're both in-house fighters.
Is that what this is?
Or are the people at Golden Boy Promotions looking to fill a void? The void left behind by Senicia Estrada, who's rumored to be leaving the promotional outfit. Are they looking to fill the void Senicia Estrada left behind with another minimum weight champion, Jocasta Valley? Is that what this is?
Your guess is as good as mine.
One thing is clear. Senicia Estrada has aspirations of becoming the minimum weight division's undisputed champion. And with Golden Boy Promotions having signed Jocasta Valley,
She still wants to do that. Now she has to deal with them, whether she stays or she goes.
what if she goes? What if the rumors check out and Senicia Estrada ends up with Matchroom or somebody? I don't know. Well, that certainly puts a fly in the ointment of that undisputed campaign. At minimum weight, she has to go through Golden Boy Promotions, a Golden Boy Promotions fighter, in order to achieve that goal. How much more difficult would that make the situation?
In that scenario, she'd still be fighting on the same platform as Jocasta Valley.
In that hypothetical scenario, but in that hypothetical scenario, that still doesn't guarantee a fight. Devine Haney and Ryan Gersha, they were both boxing on the DAZN platform under different banners, but they themselves never fought. Neither Golden Boy Promotions or Ryan Gersha were interested in making that fight. So I think about that, and I think about this. Senicia Estrada potentially leaving Golden Boy Promotions, and I ask myself, how much more difficult would that make the situation, make her undisputed campaign, if Jocasta Valley is with Golden Boy now?
Oh, you might be thinking that I'm reading too much into this.
But consider this. We are 6 months into the year of 2022. We're halfway through the year, and Senicia Estrada hasn't fought yet.
There's no tentative fight date announced.
And when last we heard from Senicia, she wasn't none too pleased. She wasn't none too happy. She was noticeably disgruntled with Golden Boy Promotions.
So Jocasta Valley is going to be making her Golden Boy Promotions debut on the undercard of Munguia versus Kelly.
Against Lorraine Villalobos, who sports a professional record of 5 wins, 3 losses, no draws, with 2 knockouts, having been stopped
way back when in 2018 by Australia's own Lulu Horton.
That's who Jocasta Valley is going to be facing. That's who she's going to be making her Golden Boy Promotions debut against. And as stated, on the face of this news, it might seem like Golden Boy Promotions is that much closer to making the unification match between Senicia and Jocasta.
Everything that glitters ain't gold, and we know, at minimum we know, there's an ongoing rift between them.
Based on the stuff that I've been hearing, which I'm not at liberty to say here and now, it's conceivable that
They might have signed Jocasta Valley to get Senicia to stay.
sweeten the deal, or they might have signed her to fill a void. The void that Senicia Estrada will potentially leave behind, should she leave Golden Boy Promotions. It's quite possible they signed her out of spite.
It don't cost as much to pay Jocasta what it's costing them to pay Senicia.
Because it don't cost them as much. Senicia might be leaving. They bring her on board in order to hamper Senicia Estrada's undisputed campaign.
Block it.
What if they're telling themselves, for what we've been paying Senicia, or what kind of money Senicia wants, well, Jocasta's a cheaper alternative, and so are her opponents. Making a fight between a Jocasta Valley and a Tina Ruprecht might be cheaper than...
Senicia Estrada makes more money than they do.
You could probably finance a unification match between them with what Senicia makes from just one fight.
Is it possible that they're doing this despite Senicia on her way out?
That instead of paying Senicia what Senicia feels she deserves to get paid, they bring another champion on board, a cheaper alternative, and finance that champion's fights while her career stagnates. Is that possible? Well, boxing is a dirty business. You hear that all the time, and you hear it for a reason.
Something's definitely going on there.
In any event, Jocasta Valley is set to make her Golden Boy Promotions debut, her first fight as a Golden Boy Promotions fighter, this weekend on the undercard of Munguia versus Kelly. Keep your eyes peeled for that. We'll see what happens beyond that fight. In other news, Oscar De La Hoya took to social media and stated he just received a 10-figure offer to sell Golden Boy Promotions. What should I do?
Lay off the booger sugar.
You can start there. Oscar De La Hoya has seemed very much unhinged as of late, constantly taking shots at Eddie Hearn.
Always talking about other people's fighters these days.
Canelo Alvarez, who isn't with him anymore. Mayweather Promotions' fighter, their prize stallion, Gervonta Davis.
Oscar even seems to have some political aspirations.
He's all over the place. He wants to sell a company. He doesn't want to sell the company. He wants to become the mayor of Las Vegas, Nevada.
He wants to become a politician.
He likes his cocaine and his hookers. He'll fit right
I
in.
don't think the fishnets are going to go over too well.
It's no secret that Oscar, he likes to party. He does seem somewhat erratic these days.
He does.
Unhinged.
He does.
It's stress. That's what I think it is. I think that Golden Boy Promotions, as a promotional outfit, they're in a bad way, and the stress is beginning to get to Oscar. Having all these fighters...
Having to promote all these fighters that fight at weights where you don't have the run of the place.
I think it's starting to get to him because he can only get those fighters to a certain point. Very recently, he stated Eddie Hearn got Canelo Alvarez beat. Bivol was irrelevant. Nobody knew him.
Eddie's a guy that can't do nothing right for a lot of people, Oscar included.
Dimitri Bivol has been a matchroom fighter for some time, and had Eddie Hearn failed to get Dimitri Bivol a super fight, you'd have a lot of people saying that he failed him as a promoter. He gets him a super fight, he wins the super fight, gets a profile.
Now Oscar De La Hoya's criticizing him for it.
Saying Canelo has a promoter now that obviously doesn't come from the boxing world. He doesn't really know the fight game. He got Canelo beat. It was the wrong style. Las Vegas has no buzz whatsoever. Canelo is the superstar of the game right now. Eddie Hearn didn't do no justice to Canelo when he matched him against Bivol. Hearn is doing a lot of fights that mean nothing, especially here in the United States. He might be a good promoter in the UK, and he's building up European fighters, but it means nothing here in the US.
He says that Eddie Hearn is doing a lot of fights that mean nothing.
As opposed to fights like Jaime Munguia versus Demetrius Ballard, Jaime Munguia versus Kelly. What the hell do those fights mean? What are they about? Fights like Ryan Garcia versus Javier Fortuna. A solid little fight, don't get me wrong, but what exactly is the fight about? Because at this point, Ryan really should be vying for a world title, an alphabet title, the way that Oscar vied for alphabet titles and world titles in his heyday. When Oscar De La Hoya says that Eddie Hearn is making fights that don't mean anything, he's throwing stones in a glass house. Oscar De La Hoya and Golden Boy Promotions, they're stable. They've probably got just one world champion, Marlon Esparza. I would mention Senicia Estrada, but Senicia may not even be with them anymore if these rumors and rumblings check out. As far as Jaime and Ryan and Zerto
and Virgil Ortiz.
What meaningful fights is Oscar De La Hoya and Golden Boy Promotions? What meaningful fights are being made for them? for those fighters.
Yeah, he pulled Jaime Munguia out of that Charlo fight that Showtime was willing to pay for.
Only so that he could turn right around and say, I hope Charlo grows some balls. Tells management team, I want to fight Munguia. He was going to fight Munguia until you pulled Munguia out of it.
He's the one that pulled Jaime Munguia out of that fight.
Saying they're not going to do it unless it's a joint pay-per-view. When that fight, it's not Maypac and it's not Maymac. It's not big enough for it to be a joint pay-per-view. It just isn't.
Oscar fucking knows that. He was just looking for any excuse to pull him out of that fight.
He said in terms of Charlo, we were ready to make the fight, Oscar De La Hoya claimed during a press conference to otherwise discuss this weekend's clash between Munguia and England's Jimmy Kilrain Kelly. We were ready to do whatever it takes to get Jaime Munguia the fight that he wants, the fight that everyone has been asking for. Obviously, one thing about Charlo and the whole PBC stable is they hide behind Al Heyman. We don't want to make ordinary fights. We want to make the best fights. So when our fighters are ready, we want to make the fights with the very best. I'm hoping Charlo grows some balls and tells his management team, I want to fight Jaime Munguia. I want to fight the very best. For now, both went their separate ways.
Mixing lies with truth.
He's a liar. The demon is a liar.
He is.
He will like to confuse us.
That's what he's doing.
But he will also mix lies with the truth to attack us.
You let Oscar tell it, and he'll make it seem like Jermall Charlo was the saboteur here. Like Jermall Charlo was the one that walked away when it was Oscar that sabotaged the fight. He walked away insisting that DAZN be involved in what he wanted to be a joint pay-per-view when this fight's not big enough to be a joint pay-per-view, and Oscar's been around the block enough times that he knows that.
No greenhorn, he's no squirrely amateur.
He knows that commercially, Charlo versus Munguia could do well at the box office, and it could do well at the gate, but it's not so big a fight that two separate platforms need to be involved. Now, you don't have anything better for Jaime to do on your side of the street. You can't afford to pay Charlo to come over to your side of things, so the best thing you should do for your fighter is send him over. You gotta be willing to roll a dice. You've got to be willing to gamble. The way that Top Rank gambled when they sent Jose Ramirez over to the DAZN side of things for that Maurice Hooker unification match.
Oscar's got to be willing to gamble in a situation like that because you don't have anything better for Jaime to do.
You don't have any high-profile fights you can make for Jaime in-house. You don't have any alphabet titles for him to fight for. So ideally, in a situation like that, when you can't match what is being offered, you've got to be willing to gamble.
If you like your fighter's chances, you believe in him, and you think he can win, you do the fight.
Rather, you let Showtime and the PBC do the fight the way that Top Rank and Bob Arum let Matchroom do the fight between Jose Ramirez and Maurice Hooker, because it's that kind of situation.
You don't have anything of equal or greater value to offer Jaime, so you're essentially wasting his time.
With Demetrius Ballard fights and Jimmy Kilrain fights, Oscar added, that's the fight we want to make. That's the type of fight boxing fans need. I'm never going to exclude my TV partner DAZN from any type of negotiation. Meet us halfway. We can walk across the street, meet halfway in the middle of the street, whatever it takes. But that's the opposite of what Oscar did. The opposite of whatever it takes.
The fight's not big enough to where two separate promoters and two separate platforms need to meet halfway. The pot's not big enough.
This fight doesn't do commercially what Wilder vs. Fury 2 did. For example, Wilder vs. Fury 2, that was a joint promotion that involved two separate promoters and two separate platforms. This fight ain't gonna do 800,000 pay-per-view buys.
Maybe 3, maybe even 4.
But 3 of 400,000 pay-per-view buys, that don't make for a big enough pot to where two separate promoters and two separate platforms need to be involved. And it's for this reason I think Oscar's stressed out, trying to disguise his inadequacies and the inadequacies of his promotional outfit at this time, that he can get guys like Jaime fights, he can get them fights, and he can line them up for world title shots, but beyond that, there's not a lot that he can do for them.
Not without sending that business to some other side of the street.
Not a lot he can do. You think about Virgil Ortiz, a world-class contender, I've no doubts. But if he ever wants to fight for an alphabet title in the welterweight division, he might have to send him over to the PBC. That's just the way it is, because that's where all the belts are. And going up to 154, junior middleweight, that's no solution, because it's the same situation up there. He can't get that guy a title. He can't get Jaime one either.
So when he says things like he's thinking about selling the company,
when he tries to shift the blame over to Charlo as to why the Munguia fight didn't happen, what I see is a stressed out guy who perhaps wants to exit the industry, exit the business, because at this time his company's in a bad way and there's not a whole lot that he can do about it. That's what I think we're looking at, today's very erratic, nonsensical Oscar De La Hoya, and what he's saying.
Virgil Ortiz, Avanesyan has pulled out the fight, I believe, to pursue more European title fights. I just want your reaction to that.
Is that what's been said?
I believe so. I can't say for sure, but the fight's out, and I know that there's an extension with the EBU. I think he will have another title defence.
I'm not saying anything because those people don't like me. But if David Avanesyan is pulled out of the Virgil Ortiz fight to look at opportunities with his European title, please don't ever mention the Conor Benn fight to me again.
That is Eddie Hearn addressing the recent fallout involving one of Oscar's boys, who I mentioned, Virgil Ortiz, how he was supposed to be fighting David Avanesyan, but the Avanesyan people pulled out. Oscar De La Hoya, like a lot of guys, likes to criticize Eddie Hearn's ability to promote fighters. But you tell me, who's doing better right now? Conor Benn in the United Kingdom or Virgil Ortiz in the United States?
And this isn't a knock on Virgil Ortiz. I think he's an excellent fighter.
What I don't think is that Oscar De La Hoya is an excellent promoter. And when you think about where the both of these boys who campaign at the same weight, you think about where they are, Conor Benn has the kind of notoriety and marquee value in the United Kingdom that Virgil Ortiz doesn't have in the United States. But Oscar wants to throw stones in a glass house.
A lot of people do.
You think about how many people like to criticize Eddie Hearn and what he's doing. Oscar De La Hoya here in America. Frank Warren, his domestic rival over there in the United Kingdom.
Eddie's got critics in the UK.
But you tell me, in the United Kingdom, whose fighter, whose welterweight, is doing better? Eddie's or Frank's?
What kind of fucking bonehead decides to go into business with Frank Warren when they're in the welterweight division?
There's a small contingent of UK fight fans to whiz Eddie Hearn can't do nothing right for them, and it just so happens that a lot of those critics, they just so happen to be big Tyson Fury fans. But outside of Tyson Fury fights, what kind of fights is Frank putting on?
Fight fans that like to criticize Eddie Hearn's ability to promote DAZN as a platform.
There are bigger fights happening in the UK on the DAZN platform. Bigger fights than what you find on BT Sport. What's Frank going to line up for David Avanesyan now?
Those guys that like to criticize Eddie Hearn, do they keep that same energy for Frank?
Do they keep that same energy when stuff like this happens? Do they keep that same energy when they see that Anthony Yarde, in all likelihood, may only fight once the entirety of this year, and that's towards the end of the year? What is Frank Warren doing for that guy?
Nothing you guys want to say about that.
Stubborn and stupid mongs don't keep the same energy for Frank that they keep for Eddie, and that much is obvious. In truth, David Avanesyan walking away from a Virgil Ortiz fight, why he did it, it's not hard to understand, not hard to wrap your mind around. Virgil Ortiz is a high-risk, low-reward fighter.
No belt, no big purse for fighting that guy.
And I think he would have splattered David Avanesyan had David and his team decided to go through with that fight. Though I think something very similar rings true when it comes to Conor Benn. Conor Benn, who was supposed to be in negotiations to take on Top Rank's own Jose Ramirez, but the Ramirez people, they didn't like the money, so they pulled out.
The story is David Avanesyan's supposed to be looking to defend his EU title or some EU opponents or something like that.
Nobody cares about that shit. Now would be the most opportune time to make a Conor Benn versus David Avanesyan fight if Eddie Hearn is so willing. And it doesn't sound like it's something that he's willing to entertain, but I myself like Conor Benn's chances in that fight.
I wouldn't be mad if they made it.